Alright, ladies and gentlemen, how are we doing? Welcome to Math with Mr. Stevens. Today we're going to be on page 158. We are continuing with our lesson 15, looking at these pairs of different graphs that are given to us, looking to compare which one of these graphs essentially is steeper. And so we're going to find and determine which one of these is steeper. Often with these it's actually pretty easy to do. Some of these that we see in the future, though, are not going to be quite as easy to determine which one is actually steeper. If we take even a look ahead just to pair 4 is quite a bit closer in terms of its steepness between the two when you have to compare them. And so that gets us into taking a look at determining the slope to find which one is actually steeper, in finding that number that will tell us which one is larger, and then in result tell us which one is steeper. But we're going to look at pair number 3 first, okay? Let me zoom in just a little tiny bit. So pair number 3, very similar to pair number 2 that we saw a little bit earlier, which is where we have a very kind of flat line, a line that is near horizontal, and then we have one that's very vertical, one that is quite steep. And so when part A asks a very simple question and asking which one of these two is steeper, very clearly, very obviously, it's graph B. Part B asks us, again, to write directions to determine how do you get from one point to the next point on this line that has been graphed on a coordinate plane. Here they give us 2 points at 1, 1, and then they also give us a point here at 6, 2. Taking a look at graph B really quickly, we've got a point at 1, 1 as well, and then a point here at 2, 5. Okay? So again, there are two real easy ways for you to figure out really the directions or your coordinates, your movements to get from one point on your line to the next. The first one is just essentially counting. So in this particular case, we look at rise over run. So in order to get from here to here, I need to go up 1. That takes me into my ordered pair there. That's all right. I know where it's at. And then we need to go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? So we need to go up 1. So for graph A, to describe its directions, we go 1 up, and then we go, before we put a +1 and a +5, and then we go 5 to the right. Again, pretty straightforward, pretty easy for us to determine how do we get from one point to the next. Really, we're just using the coordinate plane, and we're using the grid that exists on it to determine our directions to get from one point to the next. Same thing is true of graph B. So we have here, and we need to go up. So we're going to go up from 1 to 5, so that's a +4 change. And then we're going to go right from 1 to 2, so that is a +1 change. So for graph A, or graph B rather, okay, we have a 4 up and 1 right set of directions to get from one point to the next. Okay, so when it comes to part C asks you to take these directions, take these movements from one point to the next, and put them together as a ratio, just like we've done before, and we're going to call this ratio our slope. We're looking at our change in y divided by our change in x. That's going to give us our slope. Okay? So we've got, with graph A, we've got a change of +1 in terms of its y value change. So its vertical change goes as a +1, and that's going to be divided by its horizontal change, which is moving to the right, which is a +5. So we have a +1 divided by +5. That's just 1/5. And so our slope is a value of 1/5. Okay? Pretty straightforward. It's actually a pretty small slope. Again, we should find that to be true. Our slope is close to 0 because our line is actually pretty flat. Okay? This is not a very steep line. If you think about these as two different hills, this hill would be much, much easier to walk up than this one. This one's extremely steep. This one's almost like a mountain face, where this one is just kind of a nice incline of a hill. It would be a nice little power walk up that hill. Okay? Graph B, so let's do graph B. Make sure you can read all that down there. Okay, graph B, we need to take our distance and our change, which is a vertical increase of 4, okay, and that's a positive. So it's an increase in 4, and then we are moving 1 to the right, so it's a positive 1. So, let me see, so you can see that. Positive 4 over positive 1, which is just a positive 4 slope. So this line has a slope of 4, okay? So, in comparison between these two, 4 is obviously a much larger value in terms of factor when it comes than 1/5. And so as a result, we should expect a much steeper line, which is exactly what we have. That's it for this one. Adios.